فأحياكم ثم يميتكم ثم يحييكم ثم إليه ترجعون هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن 7 سماوات وهو بكل شيء عليم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. Once again everybody, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Some outstanding things about the remarkable ayah that we talked about yesterday, the 5 stages of human life. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, how dare you disbelieve in Allah and you used to be dead. That ayah, and we went through all of those stages. The first thing that I want to remind you of that I may not have emphasized enough yesterday is the uslub, the style with which the ayah begins. كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ. The word kayfa is a question word, how, right? And the word how can be asked by someone who's curious. How did you do that? Or how does that work? And that's like in science, for example, a lot of how is asked, right? A lot of science is nurtured by the question of how. But in language also, how is it used when someone's extremely disappointed with someone or hurt by someone? Mother can say to a son, how could you say that? How could you do this to me? And so the word how illustrates how disappointing someone has been and how someone has upset you. Now, the more beloved someone is, the more loved and the higher the expectations are from someone, when they disappoint you, then the more hurtful and the more the how comes out. You understand? So if you don't care about someone and they do something, it's like whatever. But when you expect things from someone, from your son, from your daughter, from your spouse, from from a loved one, from your sibling, from your student, and then they let you down, then there is a how. And Allah Azza wa Jal, first of all, there's no closeness to the human beings like the closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal. That closeness I already described to you. We were in our first original existence in the original company of Allah, directly engaged in conversation with Him. There's no closeness like that one. And no creature of Allah, no creation of Allah has been granted that kind of closeness and that kind of rank. And we're going to actually, it's interesting that the 2 ayat that I intend to cover with you today, after them we're going to get into the story of the first human being. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. That story is coming. And it seems to illustrate some very nuanced, subtle things in the Quran that don't get talked about often. The human beings that were created, the legions of human beings that were created, countless of them, that were going to come on this earth, and so many of them are still with Allah and they haven't come yet because they're going to be born a century later, 2 centuries later, Allahu A'lam when. That entire group of humanity was actually a secret kept from the angels. They had no idea. They had no clue that that's already been done. And then finally when the decision to put one human being on the earth, the first human being on the earth was declared, then Allah let them know of this intention. And let them know of rather this decision. But we'll get to that inshallah ta'ala tomorrow. But today I want to tell you that there is a unique closeness to Allah that the human being enjoys. And of course the ultimate example of that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. The height of all humanity, the peak of all humanity is our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, when Allah does call him on the Mi'raj, when he travels up to the heavens, and he has a meeting with Allah, a direct meeting with Allah. The closest any other human being ever got to that point was Musa alayhi salam, and that was on top of a mountain. And he spoke with Allah directly. The next elevation beyond that is past the 7 heavens. Jibreel alayhi salam escorts Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he takes him all the way up, and he gets to Sidratul Muntaha, and he gets to this stage, this highly classified place, where even Jibreel alayhi salam cannot go any further, as massive as Jibreel alayhi salam is, and as powerful as he is. Allah Azza wa Jal describes him as ذِي قُوَّةٍ, the possessor of great might. Actually, even the word Jibreel in its original meaning, in its root etymology from Hebrew, they call him Gabriel. It's Gabriel actually from the Hebrew language. And the Arabic language adopted it. It shares the root with Arabic, which is Jabr, which means power and ability to exert force. And the mighty one of Allah, the mighty angel of Allah, that's Jibreel alayhi salam. So when he spreads his wings and when he covers over the sky, then actually you can't see anything else. وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ بِالْأُفُقِ الْمُبِينِ. Not fil ufuq al-mubin. Like he took over the entire sky. You couldn't see anything else but Jibreel alayhi salam. That same angel, when he escorts Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the way up to meet with Allah, there's a point where if he travels any further, his wings will get burnt off. He says, I can't go any further, only you can. That's the closeness Allah has granted to the human being. And that's something very, very special to Allah. Now with that closeness, every single human being, is brought onto this earth. The ruh is blown into our mothers and we come into this life. And of course now we have two existences. This soul of ours, this thing made of light, this ruh, this mystery, lives inside of a physical body. And this physical body has physical needs. It has desires. It has appetite. It gets exhausted. It has an existence other than the existence of the ruh. As a matter of fact, when we are sleeping, the ruh is still alive and well, and it's traveling, and it's doing all kinds of things, right? And then it's put back inside of ourselves, So Allahu yatawaffa al-anfus hina mawtiha. Allah takes the selves, the actual self that you are away from you at the time of your death, but even in your sleep, He takes it away. Now why am I bringing this up? Because as human beings, as we grow up, we have this, first of all, this thing inside of us that was in the company of Allah that's constantly seeking light. But you know what? The body takes over. And when the body takes over, human beings get obsessed with things that they need for their physical body. They get obsessed with food. They get obsessed with shelter. They get obsessed with desire, temptation. They get obsessed with, nurturing a family. They get obsessed with amassing more in the physical, material sense, right? And that's a struggle that every human being has. They're amassing things for their physical body, and sometimes in doing so, they're starving the soul inside of themselves. Because the thing you have inside you, it's not from this world. It didn't come from here, it came from the sky. And nothing in this world can feed it. Everything in this world can only feed what? Your body, because your body is made from dirt. And it's from this earth that the body was made. So all of its needs, all of its desires, all of its temptations are fulfilled from where? Here. But there's something inside of us that is just not fulfilled except with something that comes, because it's from the sky. So it can only be fed from the sky. It can only be fed from the sky. And that's revelation. The idea of revelation is to feed this starving thing inside. Because that revelation, like the Prophet ﷺ would describe, is a rope. It's called light, it's also called a rope. What does it do? It takes that ruh that was longing, that light inside of us that was longing for a connection to Allah. Because it's so distant from Allah now it's connected back to Allah again with that rope. That's the imagery that's painted in the Qur'an of our relationship with Allah. But when someone is given this, when someone's handed that revelation, now the thing that connects you back to your master who you were in such close company of, the same one who delivered you. He commanded the angel to deliver you into the belly of your mother. You forgot about him? How could you? كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ. When you get to this ayah, it's actually supposed to put a human being to shame. كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ. And kufr here is not just in the meaning of disbelieving or denying Allah. That is part of the meaning. But it comes in the meaning of kufran and ni'mah also. How can you be ungrateful to Allah? After this reconnection I'm giving you a chance to connect back to me and you're still in denial? Did you forget all the stages I brought you through? ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ at the end, then you're going to be taken back to Him. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ. He, in fact, is the same one who created you. I'm translating this way on purpose. It's a strange way of translating, but I'm doing that deliberately. The name of Allah in this ayah is actually a dhamir. It's a pronoun, huwa. A pronoun from a language perspective, يَعُودُ إِلَى مَا سَبَقَ. It goes back to what came before it. In other words, Allah is saying the same one who had created you before, and you didn't even have this body, and He put you to sleep. Then He put you inside of your mothers. Then the one who gives you life in this world and will give you death again. That same one is the one خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He's the same one who created for you whatever's in the earth, all together, all of it. Now what's the connection? The first thing to understand is the connection with the previous ayah. You were in the closest company of Allah, which illustrates how much love Allah has for you. Allah didn't do that for other creations the way He did that for you. And then He decided that He will build you a home on this earth, on this planet. In the entire universe, He picked this small planet for our habitat, our home. And then He says, He goes out of His way to say that He created especially for you. He went out of His way for your sake to create things on this earth all together. Meaning everywhere on this earth there is something that you can benefit from. That is for you. This is a profound statement. Scholars were baffled by this statement. How is everything in the world created for us? how is a mosquito created for me? You know, atheists ask this question, right? Well, how are cockroaches created for me? Explain that one to me. Or how is this created for me or that created for me? Like they'll ask this question, because if everything is for me, then no thanks, I don't like bacteria. Or I don't want virus. Or I don't want this, right? You know, they'll say, how is that for me? The response to that is actually you have to take a step back and take a deeper look at what Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying. The idea of benefit for a materialist, when a person can only think in the material sense, their idea of benefit can only be what? Material. There's no other benefit in their view because they've become entirely materialistic. ذَلِكَ مَبْلَغُهُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ وَلَمْ يُرِدْ إِلَّا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا ذَلِكَ مَبْلَغُهُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ. He didn't want anything but worldly life. That's the extent of their knowledge. That's as far as they can think. So when they think of anything in the world, they say, how does this physically benefit me? How does this in some, in consumption, in my wealth, in my status, in my security, how is this material good for me? That's the only way they can think of benefit. And that's the tragedy of a human being who forgets that he's not just made of a body, but he's also made of a ruh. And there's a benefit to the body, and there's also a benefit to the ruh. What Allah created on this earth, so much of it is a benefit to our body, and so much of it is a benefit to our ruh. There are things on this earth that terrify us. Alligators are terrifying. Snakes cobras are terrifying. These things, when they have their fangs out, are like they'll petrify you just out of fear, And these things are a reminder to a believer, if Allah can create this kind of fear on the earth, if I disobey Him, what kind of fear can He create in the akhirah? What kind of punishment can He make in the akhirah? You understand? When there's some kind of thing you find disgusting in the world, you find snails disgusting, cockroaches disgusting. If you think this ugliness or this insect or this creature that is surrounded by filth and you hate it, you can't stand it, and the smell of it, when you look at these ugly things, you're reminded in this world that Allah Azza wa Jalla, just like in this world, He gives you a snapshot, a little picture of Jannah. He'll also give you a little picture of what? Jahannam. He'll also give you a picture of Jahannam. He'll tie physical realities to spiritual realities. He'll do that for you all, over and over again. So even things that don't physically benefit you are still a reminder for you. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَتَذْكِرَةً لَذِكْرَةً. It is a powerful reminder in this for you, in that for you, and that for you. And by the way, a reminder is always something of benefit. فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّ نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. A reminder is always of benefit. So the world and everything in it is actually a matter of benefit. Whether it's directly of benefit, like the animal, and the skin of the animal, and the flesh of the animal, and the milk of the animal, and the ride of the animal. There's so much of the animal that is of benefit. Or there are animals that we can't eat or consume, or they're poisonous or dangerous. Even they have benefit. If the benefit is physical, then the benefit is what? Spiritual. And since the human being is both of these things, so Allah Azza wa Jalla created this earth to benefit both parts of our existence. The physical part of our existence and the spiritual part of our existence. This brings me to another very important point. The unity and the consistency in how Allah does things. It's called the sunnah of Allah. Sunnat Allah وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. It's the legacy of Allah, the way Allah does things, and you will not find any alteration or change in the way that Allah does things. And there's no way it can be replaced. Now, part of what, in order to explain this to you, I won't be abstract, I'll try to be as practical as I can be. Some people are very practical people. They're very practical. Don't tell me about the meaning of this word, or how beautiful this ayah is, or how the words connect with each other. Just tell me what's halal and what's haram, man, that's it, that's all I care about. Just get to the point. Just give me that. Because I just need to, Islam is about action, and we should take action, and that's the end of it, okay? Just give me a list of what's halal and what's haram, and I'm good to go. We have to be practical as Muslims. There are some people that are very practical in life. And there are some people that are very artistic in life. And some of your children are very, and by the way, some of these more practical people, they end up in the hard sciences, right? And some of the more artistic people, they might end up studying philosophy, art, literature. They might become poets. And the practical guys like, poetry, what do you do with that? What do you do with poetry? Give me the manual for a car or something. I'd rather read that than poetry, What happens is you have some people that are only concerned, it's in the language sense you can say, some people are only concerned with substance. And some people are concerned very much with style. right? Some people are of substance and some people are of style. The thing about Allah Azza wa Jal, this world that He created, He didn't make a world of, because He said He made it for us. خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. This world, is it only about practicality? Or did He make things stylistic and beautiful and, artistic? Did He do that in this earth? Yeah. Actually, human beings are very functional creatures, right? We're very practical creatures. But He also says, صَوَّرَكُمْ فَأَحْسَنَ صُوَرَكُمْ. He molded you, He crafted you, and how beautifully He crafted you. There's a beauty in which the way the human being was created. There's a beauty that Allah Azza wa Jal created in the things around us, and He points at that beauty. And all of our senses, whether it's sight or sound or smell or touch, every one of them has beauty in them. So there are things you enjoy touching. There's a surface or the texture, the touch of it gives you pleasure. The sight of something gives you pleasure. You appreciate its beauty. The smell of something gives you pleasure. Food didn't have to smell good, as I brought up before. But it's actually something that Allah added to the beauty of food. He made it smell beautiful. He made it look, food could be the most delicious thing in the world. But if it looks like dead insects, you're not going to eat it. It has to look good too. Presentation is part of it, isn't it? And that's the sunnah of Allah. In what He made around us, He didn't just make things only practical, and He didn't just make things only beautiful. He actually has a combination of both. Because both of them are necessary. Both of these things in the life of, because we're not robots. If we were robots and we had no personality, then practical is enough. But Allah Azza wa Jal added a dimension of beauty in life. And by the way, since that is the sunnah of Allah for all of these ayat, all of what He created, He exhibited the same exact sunnah in the Qur'an. The Qur'an is not only practical. The Qur'an just tells you, do this, don't do this. If you wanted a list of halal and haram, and who to worship and what not to worship and what to believe, I can fit that on one page. Honest to God, you can believe in one God, angels, afterlife, which is made up of Day of Judgment, heaven, hell. Heaven's really good, hell's really bad. Here's what you can't eat. Here's what you can't drink. Done. This is what you got to do. These are your obligations. Finish. What does Allah do? He brings up things in His book that make you feel grateful. He brings up things about your past. He makes you think about the favors that He has given you. He makes you ponder upon the words that He chose. He repeats Himself, and every time He repeats Himself, it hits the heart differently. Some parts of the Qur'an are extremely practical. يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. Allah is giving you counsel about your children, the distribution of boys and girls when the will is being distributed, when the inheritance is very practical, legal ayat. Then there are ayat in which there's all there is beauty, subhanallah. All there is profound beauty. There's no istikhraj of a hukum. You can't pull out a ruling from it. All you can get is subhanallah. That's all you can get out of those ayat. So the Qur'an itself is actually a perfect combination of style and substance. It's both of these things. And both of these things are beneficial for the human being. One of them is not more beneficial than the other. One of them is not more useful than the other. One is incomplete without the other. And so our study of the Qur'an is both of those things. It's always going to be. It's going to be a study of practically what does Allah want us to do. But it's also going to be a study of the appreciation of the beauty of the word of Allah. The perfection of the word of Allah. Both of those things have to go hand in hand. Because that, at the end of the day, is the sunnah of Allah in all things, including His word. Is that clear to everybody? So that's a very important consideration when we say, خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He created for your benefit, for you, whatever has been placed on the earth altogether. Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, أي مِنْ أَجْلِكُمْ says, for your sake, interpreting this ayah, he says, for your sake especially. Another place in the Qur'an, Allah says, سَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِنْهُ. He subdued for you. Sakhara is actually used for domesticating animals, like a wild horse. When you calm it down and it's kind of now, it's lost its pride and it's subjugated before its master, سَخَّرْتَ الْفَرَسِ. You've subjugated the horse and now it's domesticated. Now it's under your control. It listens to you now when you whistle or something, or do whatever they do. That's taskhir of an... Allah says He did taskhir of the skies and the earth for you. مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِنْهُ. And you're wondering, like the exhaustive universe, how infinitely vast the universe is. All of it has been subdued for us? How? How has it been subdued? Because our idea of subdued is, well, it's under our control then. Because when an animal is subdued, it's under our control. Now, a lot of things in the world, are they under our control? Yeah. We are able to manipulate and control resources on this earth like nobody else. We're able to create things out of the material, the raw materials of this earth like nobody else. No other creature has been able to do with these raw materials what human beings were capable of doing. And that the example of that is everything down to the building we're sitting in, the clothes we're wearing, the technology we're using to broadcast this. This is all made of the raw materials made available on this earth. And in that sense, Allah did subdue this entire earth for us. He did. But the skies is another story. How did He subdue the skies? Some are of the opinion that eventually Allah will give us, ways of space travel because of these ayat. It's like, okay, we don't have it yet, but we'll get there. And we're going to have intergalactic travel, and Star Wars got nothing on us, and we're going to, warp speed and all of it, But I think there's a more practical explanation here. And that is that, when you study the vastness of the universe, and when you talk to scientists that study the vastness of the universe, then you'll find a common theme among them. And the common theme is the universe is full of all kinds of chaos. There are all kinds of explosions of the magnitude that we can't even imagine, happening all the time. Entire star systems get destroyed, planets get warped, black holes in the universe. I mean, if you can imagine the impact of the explosion of a bomb and the effect that would have on an ant, that's nothing compared to the kinds of explosions and the kinds of impacts and the kinds of activity that's happening in the universe. And they describe it basically as chaos. What's happening in the universe is what? Is chaos. And any one of those gigantic meteors, if at any point, because they're moving all over the place, so they're like, this earth is pretty awesome, but I'm really nervous as a scientist because, we got lucky this far, but it could be that at any moment, one of those giant meteors or one of those giant, hurling objects in space comes and does what? Hits this planet and we're done. It's finished. So it could be in a matter of a second that all life on this earth is gone. Allah Azza wa Jal, for those who observe and study the vastness of the universe and see the kind of destruction that is possible within the universe, humbles the human being by reminding them, He subdued that wild creature of the skies and He kept it at bay and nothing strikes you. Nothing strikes you. Like they have movies made of like a meteor coming towards the earth and the earth is going to get destroyed and we have to now get a spaceship and get on the meteor and blow it up before it hits the earth. Stupid stuff. When Allah decides this, right, you ain't getting on no rocket to get on no meteor. That ain't happening. It's going to be done with. But Allah Azza wa Jal has subdued and kept them at bay. It's almost like saying, you are in the proximity of a wild animal. And Allah has gone out of His way to calm down the wild animal. Like Allah calmed down the fire for Ibrahim alayhi salam. Kuni bardan wa salaman. Be cool. Be a source of peace on Ibrahim alayhi salam. That's the impact. And in that sense, also the earth. Look, the earth is capable of volcanic eruptions. The earth is capable of earthquakes. The earth is capable of cracking open. The earth is capable of, tectonic shifts, and entire tsunamis can hit and drown us even if we're hundreds of miles away from sea. There are waves possible that can actually wipe all of us out in no time. Okay? And this stuff, people who study geology say, yeah, that could actually happen at any time too. So even the earth is capable of just letting loose, going crazy. But Allah did what to the earth? Subdued it. He humbled the earth. He kept it calm. And this is actually something that at the end of the cycle of the world, when the world does come to an end, when Allah Azza wa Jal decides that this world is no longer meant to serve this purpose, now the Day of Judgment is going to begin, then one of the expressions for the earth is وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا. The earth will bring out its heavy burdens, like it's been holding its breath, it's been wanting to explode. And it's just like, and finally Allah says, go ahead. And it just goes crazy. The oceans start boiling over. إِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ فُجِّرَتْ. Oh my God. The oceans just start exploding and boiling over. The earth starts getting stretched. إِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. It starts getting stretched And whatever's inside it start getting thrown. It starts throwing out whatever it's had. And takhallat is actually used when a mother gives birth and goes, ah. When the baby comes out and she feels that relief, Allah describes the earth is going to be like, I'm holding so much inside me that I just want to spit out. And it's going to give it out, and finally the earth is going to go, oh. The image of alqat ma fiha wa takhalat is like a sheet, like a crumpled up sheet on a bed with stuff on it, and you yank it and everything just pops up. You know? That's the image of what's going to happen with the earth. But until then, sakhara lakum. He subdued it for you. خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Another interpretation of مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا has actually been, the جَمِيعًا goes back to أنتم. يعني أنتم جَمِيعًا. Meaning, He created whatever is on this earth for all of you, all together, for humanity to share at large. And by the way, the conversation here began with Ya ayyuhan nas, people. So all people were supposed to share the resources on the earth. This was supposed to be a place we had to learn to coexist. This was not a place where all human beings, by the way, you will learn later on, inshallah, when you get to surahs like Surah Al-Ma'idah and other places, we're going to learn that actually for the majority of the world's existence, Allah's plan was not to make everybody Muslim. We're supposed to carry out the da'wah, yes. We're supposed to be able to preach the message of Islam. But the history of humanity, and even the future of humanity, until a very late time, almost right before the Day of Judgment, right at the end, you find the entire earth is believer. But for the vast majority of the career, the story of humanity, humanity was supposed to have been diverse. It was supposed to be a mix of Christians and Jews and Buddhists and others and, Seekers and Muslims. And they were supposed to be there, and Allah opened the blessings of this earth for who? For all of them. For all of them. And this is actually part of the plan of Allah. That He, Ya ayyuhan nas, that's where the conversation began. He's the one who created the world for you. All of it, all together. Because the blessings of the earth were the way by which human beings could find their way back to Allah. So then He says, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ. I'll roughly translate in one of the possible translations. There are several possible, but I'll only incline towards one because I don't want to get too philosophical in this discussion. He says, then He turned His attention towards the sky and balanced them out into 7 skies. He turned, and ila sama could also mean He turned His attention upward. Sama comes from the word sumu, which means upwards. So He turned His attention upwards and molded or fashioned or evened, balanced them into 7 skies, 7 layers of skies. Now what in the world does that mean? Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah says, for example, about al-istiwa, the word I explained as turning attention towards something has several meanings. The first of them, al-istiwa'u fil lugha al-irtifa'u wal-'ulu'u 'ala ash-shay'. فإذا استويت أنت ومن معك على الفلك لتستووا على ظهوري. Quran uses the word istawa to rise over something, to climb onto something. Like when Nuh alayhi salam and his people were going to climb on the ship, Allah Azza wa Jal says, فإذا استويت أنت ومن معك على الفلك. When you and those who are with you rise up and settle on the ship. Okay? The same way when you're riding on an animal and you sit on an animal, لتستووا على ظهوره. So that you can climb up and sit on its backs. Allah Azza wa Jal uses the same word for the idea of the arsh, which is above the 7 heavens. Allah says, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. Right? He rose up, that's one possible translation. He rose up on the throne. But then the problem becomes, what does that mean? Human beings they can't help themselves but start imagining a throne and a king rising up on the throne. And this becomes inappropriate for Allah Azza wa Jal. So Imam Malik's statement became kind of a standard in this ummah. And I'll repeat that for all of our benefit. Al-istiwa'u ghayru majhul. Rising, the idea of istiwa, whether it means turning attention or rising, it is not unknown. It's very well known that Allah did the act of istiwa on the arsh. It's not a mystery that happened. Okay? وَالْكَيْفُ غَيْرُ مَعْقُولٍ. And how it happened cannot be understood. That is a matter with Allah that just can't be understood. وَالْإِيمَانُ بِهِ وَاجِبٌ. And believing that it happened is absolutely mandatory. It is a necessary part of our faith. وَالسُّؤَالُ عَنْهُ بِدْعَةٌ. And asking about it, how exactly did it happen? Could you explain to me? What does it mean? Does that mean there's a throne? Does it have decoration? When you start getting into really wanting to find out these details, then he says asking about it is a heinous innovation, meaning a new thing invented in the religion that will destroy the religion. So Imam Malik's idea of bid'ah, for example, in this statement, is that of people focusing on things that they shouldn't be focusing on. Allah Azza wa Jalla in the beginning of this surah put us in our place when He said Alif Lam Mim. There are some things that are only with Allah. And you know what's most beautiful in this ayah? I love this part. He says, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ. And you're like, how? I want to know how. I want to know how. I want to know how. And Allah says to you in the ayah, وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. He knows everything. What is He telling you? You don't know anything. You don't know, just know your place. Just by the time you get to this part and say, I want to know the details of how that works, Allah Himself puts the believer's mind at rest and says, you need to be okay with the fact that you don't know everything, only Allah does. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. It's incredible that the ayat have so much guidance in them. They have an orientation in them. Quran is not just about knowledge, it's a way to think. It's a way to think. So the thinking of the human being is directed by the kalam of Allah. But some did say, well, I translated it as turned attention. Where did I get that from? Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, Imam al-Qurtubi says, أَقْبَلَ إِلَيْهِ Istawa, أَقْبَلَ إِلَيْهِ. Face towards it, turn towards it. كَانَ فُلَانٌ مُقْبِلًا عَلَيَّ أو على فلان ثم استوى إلي أو علي. And this is the position of Imam al-Bayhaqi also. He interpreted it as قصد إليها. He turned his attention towards it. بعد ذلك. You know? So now, what are some benefits that we can derive without getting into the philosophical details of the unseen? What are some things we can benefit from in this ayah? Allah Azza wa Jal first mentioned the earth, then He mentioned the skies. Even though in other places in the Quran, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ ضَحَاهَا أَخْرَجَ مِنْهَا مَاءَهَا وَمَرْعَاهَا. Like He created the skies, and after that He made the earth. That's what He mentions elsewhere. But here He says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ إِسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. So it seems like the order is reversed here. The word ثُمَّ in Arabic doesn't just come for tarahi, doesn't just come for this happened, thereafter this happened. ثُمَّ can also be thought of, you can say, idafatan, meaning moreover. Not only did He make everything in this world for your benefit, moreover, He turned His attention towards the sky. You can also translate it here as secondarily, He turned His attention towards the sky and molded them into 7 skies. You know what that's teaching us? That's actually teaching us that Allah is in this ayah telling us what a priority He made for the world, this world, to be extra beautiful for the human being, for it to be a comfortable place for the human being. And Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, I'll quote him again, because he said such profound things about this ayah. He says, لِتَتَقَوَّوْا عَلَى طَاعَتِهِ. He made this earth beautiful, functional, practical, full of blessings for you, so you can gain the strength to be obedient to Him. So you can be appreciative of Allah and obey Him more. So you can have all the energy you need, all the resources you need to worship Him better. Subhanallah. لِتَتَقَوَّوْا عَلَى طَاعَتِهِ. So فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَوَاتٍ. He balanced them into 7 skies. What those 7 skies means, only Allah Azza wa Jal knows. By the way, the sister of this surah is Ali Imran, the next surah. And in the beginning of that surah, Allah will address this issue again. You'll notice that there are some things that we cannot know in their full scope. There's no way for us to know. And Allah will mention that here again, وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٍ. There are some things that are ambiguous. They sound like you can get it, but you really can't get it. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. People who have some kind of deviation in their hearts, they get after that stuff. They get obsessed with what they can't know. ابتغاء الفتنة, to start some new kind of scandal. وابتغاء تأويله, or to come out with some new interpretation so they can take credit and say, by the way, I come up with a new interpretation for this. Nobody else figured this out, I figured this out. Now I know what the 7 skies means. You know? And I'll tell you my own personal position, Allahu Ta'ala a'lam bis-sawab, in my own study of the Quran, what I find the most convincing about the 7 skies is that the most we will ever know physically is the first sky. Like the most human beings will ever get to is the first sky. What's that based on? There are 7 skies. The lowest sky is called as-sama ad-dunya, literally meaning the lowest sky. Lowest of how many? 7, right? Allah says, وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحِ. We beautified the lowest sky with lamps. What's He referring to as lamps? Stars. So when you get the most powerful telescopes in existence, and you can look at hundreds of thousands, if not millions and billions of light years into space. And as far as you can see, what do you see? Stars, which means the decoration of all we see is still stars. So long as you're seeing stars, you're still in what sky? The lowest one. The lowest one. And then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, there's other floors to go. Subhanallah. So this is just, فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. The last comment on this, inshallah ta'ala, and I'll actually make it short today because maybe I do want to go further. Yeah, we have time. And you guys just got relief, but no. I'm going to go further. I'll tell you something about shirk on the side. But before I talk about shirk, actually something I meant to tell you. The journey of the human being began, Allah Azza wa Jal talked about it, that you used to be dead and He brought you life. And then He talked about the world being created for us. It seems like Allah is talking about the beginnings, right? The surah is beginning with the beginnings. And it's very appropriate that the Qur'an, the entire Qur'an, its first major chapter is Baqarah. And the first part of Baqarah was about our relationship with revelation itself. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Those who believe in it, those who are hypocritical about it, all of that. Those who, produce something like it if you don't believe in it, people who criticize it and talk about its examples, that was done with. Now Allah starts talking about the beginnings of not just the human being, but the beginnings of all creation. And this is very appropriate in the beginning of the Qur'an itself, right? The story of humanity starting with the story mentioned in Baqarah and the narrative in Baqarah. By the time you get to the end of the Qur'an, the last several surahs of the Qur'an, I think everybody here knows that the overwhelming subject matter is the afterlife. So it's as though in the sequence of the Qur'an you have the beginning of the journey of the human being all the way to what? The end of that journey, subhanallah. Like it's this beautiful timeline illustrated even in the order of the Qur'an. But what I wanted to share with you is that about that longing for Allah, one thing I skipped, and it's really valuable. I find it really valuable. Allah Azza wa Jal says, and I remember I told you, one of the last things I told you yesterday was human beings, everything they pursue, the pursuit of beauty and the pursuit of perfection, they find themselves unsatisfied and keep wanting more and more and more. Where does it ever end? Qur'an itself tells us, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. And that only towards your master, when you head towards your Rabb, will you find the final stop. Like you won't want anymore. You won't want anymore. Allah Azza wa Jal describes in Jannah, people being given by Allah. And they keep saying, Hasbi Rabbi. My master, enough. I don't want any more. I don't want any more. They're completely satisfied. In this world, even if you say, I don't want any more, you do. Like, when you're at somebody's house and they're like, nahi aur khaye. Like, nahi. Like, hurry up, put more. Not the big piece, actually. And they put the piece with all the bones and not the meat, and you're like, I want more. This is what you give me? But when we come in the company of Allah, there's no more to want. And one of my favorite ayat in the Qur'an, man, this is the most favorite ayah in the Qur'an. Right after Allah says, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى, He says, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. He is the one who makes one laugh, and He's the one who makes one cry. Every laughter you've enjoyed, every bit of joy you've enjoyed, actually was revealed from Allah. And every time you've cried, it was given by Allah. And the ultimate experience, and by the way, a laughter is an expression of something you enjoyed. And enjoyment is a fraction of what you had when you were in the company of Allah. And there are tears of sadness, but the strongest of tears are not tears of sadness. They're tears of joy. When someone's so happy, they can't even help crying. Like, men do that sometimes, women do that a lot. Why are you crying? I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Like, this is happy? This looks exactly like yesterday's sad. How am I supposed to tell the difference? But there is such a thing as being so overwhelmed with joy that your laughter starts coming with what? With tears. And this ayah is so beautifully placed because when finally we are in the company of Allah, إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. Can you imagine meeting with Allah again? What emotions will a human being go through when they're in the company of Allah again? It's going to be laughter and it's going to be tears. And He's going to cause it because we're in His company. أَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. It's so amazing. And if you're looking forward to that, then it's okay. Then the death that is coming to all of us in this life is not a problem anymore. So the next ayah is وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. He's the one who's going to give death, and He's the one who's going to give life. You know, these 7 skies that Allah just talked about, what is the function of them for us? We're going to travel these 7 skies. The soul is going to go through, the Prophet would tell us, when we die, we're going to go through these 7 skies. We're going to be meeting angels at every one of these stops. And eventually come before Allah Azza wa Jalla and be told that this is a good soul, may Allah make us of them. And they're brought back into their grave and they're just enjoying, relaxing. They're in raha. They're in relaxation until Allah Azza wa Jalla calls them again. But now they've been in the company of Allah. You know, this is the journey that all of us have to look forward to. And so now Allah Azza wa Jalla begins way at the beginning, when this whole story began, when all human beings were created, but one of them was chosen to come to this earth first, because we were all with Allah. By the way, Adam alayhi salam is the first human being, yes? Only in the worldly sense. Only in the worldly sense. Why? Because in the spiritual sense, all of us were created when? At the same time. This is why Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى آدَمَ. No doubt Allah chose Adam. You can only choose someone when there is a what? Choice. There's others. If Adam alayhi salam is the only one, then you don't say istafa. And He put him next to إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى آدَمَ وَنُوحًا وَآلَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَآلَ عِمْرَانَ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. No doubt Allah in fact chose Adam alayhi salam, Nuh, Ibrahim, the family of Imran, you know, over all the other nations of the world. And all of them we know were chosen from among their nation. So who is Adam chosen among from? Of all the arwah, one of them is pulled, and that is the ruh of Adam alayhi salam, and then He's going to put it into this body, the first body that's been created by Allah, the one crafted by Allah Himself. You see, Allah Azza wa Jal, He even says, هُوَ الَّذِي يُصَوِّرُكُمْ فِي الْأَرْحَامِ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. He's the one who molds you inside the bellies of your mothers, however He wants. All of us are actually Allah design. All of us are Allah's design. But the first design is actually that of Adam alayhi salam. And when someone has beautiful eyes, a nice forehead, good skin, texture, color, hair, all of the good features that a human being can have, somebody has good height, you know, somebody has good bone structure, whatever it may be. The ultimate form of all of it was actually given to Adam alayhi salam and our mother Hawa salamun alayha. And all the beauty that human beings have thereafter is actually a byproduct of the beauty that our parents enjoyed. They're the most beautiful human beings ever created, those two, you know. And because Allah Himself directly molded him out of clay. That's the most direct creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that was made, all of the other creations, they're on the earth. That creation is up in Jannah. That molding is happening up in Jannah. So it's unique. Now Allah Azza wa Jal finally decides this, and He says this, and before I tell you what He says, I want to share with you what happens in the biblical account. In the Bible, in the Old and New Testament, there is no record of the conversation we're about to read in the Quran. There's no such record of Allah talking to the angels and saying, I've decided I'm going to put someone on the earth. Okay? I'm going to put a Khalif. There's no conversation. However, the Christian and Jewish tradition is not limited to the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's a lot of oral tradition. There are a lot of additional texts and writings. I told you before there were factions of the Jewish community that actually believed in exhaustive oral tradition. And a lot of these oral traditions were passed down generation after generation. And they were very vastly in circulation about 3 centuries before the coming of Isa alayhi salam and 3 centuries after. So these 600 years is actually when a lot of these oral traditions were also starting to get documented. These are extra biblical texts. They're not from the Bible, they're in addition to the Bible. And it's actually in these texts that you find reference to Judgment Day, hellfire, heaven, jinn, angels, and this story too. It's not found in the Bible, but it's found in some of the Babylonian rabbinic accounts and the Talmudic accounts. There is something like this story. So I want to tell you the closest thing to this that people remembered. It's not accurate, but I still want to tell you what they remembered, or what they believed. They believed that God decided to create human beings, create a human being, but before He created him, He called a bunch of angels. And He said to them, I'm going to create a human being and put him on the earth. And he's going to, he's going to have control over the sea and the fish, and he's going to eat from the fruits, and he's going to have all this dominion over the land. What do you think? And the angel said, terrible idea, no, I don't think we should do this. This is bad. And God destroyed all those angels. Then he called a whole bunch of new angels and said, what do you think? I'm going to create a human being. They said, terrible idea, it's really bad. They're going to kill each other. They're going to make bombs and tanks, whatever. And, it's bad. He kills all of them too. Then he calls a third group of angels. And he says, what do you think? I'm going to create a human being. They said, seems like a good idea. Let's go for it. And that's when he created the human being. Okay? So that's roughly and when I first heard this, I didn't believe it. I did not believe, come on, no. This, really? So it just so happened that yesterday's iftar was at the Irving Masjid, and it was a civic iftar, so we had leaders from the Jewish community, Christian community, several churches that were there. And I spoke at the iftar, and after the iftar, I'm sitting next to the rabbi, and I was like, hey, so the creation story, do you guys have God asked the angels, and then he killed all of them because they said bad idea, and then he brought a whole bunch of other angels and killed all of them too, and then another? He goes, yeah, we have that. I was like, okay, verified story, excellent. Now I can quote it in my lecture. Heard it from the horse's mouth, the kosher horse's mouth, the rabbi's mouth. But anyway, but thanks to the rabbi for confirming it. Anyway, so, but the idea is, now what does the Quran do with this? This was the known kind of story within the Jewish community, and the Quran is retelling the story, but what does Allah do? Allah doesn't ask the angels, what do you think? Allah tells them. In Arabic, when you say, أَجْعَلُ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, I'm going to put, I'm not translating khalifa yet because it's loaded, I'm going to put a khalifa on the earth. That means you can say, well, are you sure? We could discuss this. But you say, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ, when you use the ism fa'il, when you use the definitive active participle. This is now a noun, it's set. I have made up my mind, no doubt about it, I am putting a khalifa on the earth. Allah Azza wa Jalla is not asking the angels their opinion, He's actually telling them. He's telling them, this decision has been made. This is done, I'm informing you, not asking you. Okay? Now Allah is talking to the legions of angels. Allah did not specify that there's a small group of them. Some ulama believe that this was some angels. Others believe it was all the angels. At the very least, you would have to argue these are the angels that are closest to Allah, which Allah describes in the Quran, حَافِينَ حَوْلَ الْعَرْشِ, the ones that are surrounding and doing tawaf around the arsh, يَحْمِلُونَ عَرْشَ رَبِّكَ فَوْقَ يَوْمَئِذٍ فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ ثَمَانِيَةٌ, the 8 that are hovering and holding the arsh of Allah together, يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ, they're the ones who are doing tasbih of Allah. The countless angels in the infinite number that are closest to Allah are now hearing the announcement, I am putting a khalifa on the earth. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. The other thing to note here that's very important, and I find this very convincing, Dr. Samir Rai pointed this out, may Allah preserve him. He points out that the command that is coming, you guys all know the story, the command is that he's going to do sajda, right? That Allah is going to tell them to do sajda. But actually, the command to prostrate for the angels is one, but it seems that Allah went out of His way to ask Iblis exclusively to do sajda too. مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدْ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ. What prevented you from doing sajda, from prostrating, when I specifically commanded you? So there's a collective command to all of the angels, but in Surah Al-A'raf we learn that Allah exclusively targeted who? Iblis. Khasatan. Now, Allah mentions that once. He doesn't mention that every time. And we know that Iblis, if you follow the Israeli narrations, these are again extra biblical texts, that that he was given dominion, even kingdom or leadership over the angels, and he had this high position. So when Allah commanded them, it includes him. The Quran is hinting that Allah commanded him directly also. That solves the problem. Because for a lot of people, the ayah says Allah commanded the angels, and they all did sajda except who? Iblis. And they're like, well, if Allah commanded the angels, then he must have been from the angels. But Quran itself solves that problem by saying Allah exclusively commanded him. Allah actually issued the order to him in addition. And that resolves that problem. But anyway, إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am putting a khalifa in the next 10 or 12 minutes or so, inshallah. I'll just say some things about the word khalifa that I think are, that is valuable. I'm going to put a khalifa, someone to be left behind on the earth. I don't know how far we can take the extra biblical texts and rely on them. they seem to be in line with what the Qur'an is suggesting. That's the only reason I'll bring them up. Because they don't seem to contradict the account of the Qur'an. They seem to be in line with the account of the Qur'an. And a lot of those oral traditions, in one way or the other, are passed down, how much they've been changed from the teachings of prophets. After all the corruption, it's still somehow or the other, you can tell from the teachings of prophets, right? Now, part of their story, the Jewish story that didn't make its way into Torah, but extra texts, is they had a group called B'nai Elohim. That's a Hebrew terminology, literally meaning, it's blasphemous in our terminology, children of God. Okay? I'm sure you've heard Christians and Jews use the phrase, we're all children of God, right? Which actually, in a figurative sense, means people that are close to God or dear to God. Doesn't literally mean children. So there's a story about these creatures that were close to God, that were placed on the earth, and they caused all kinds of chaos on the earth. And then that rebellion was put down. Okay, that's the account that they have. And some of our Mufassirun have actually taken that from the Israeliyat, which doesn't mean they took it from the Old Testament, but also suggests that the Muslim scholars were in access of these extra biblical texts as well. But anyway, so this rebellion was put down, and now Allah Azza wa Jal decides once again to the angels, by the way, I've decided I'm going to leave somebody behind on the earth, Khalifa. Khalifa comes from the Arabic word khalf, which means to be behind, literally. So some have interpreted it to mean يَخْلُفُ بَعْضُهُ بَعْضًا, that I will leave someone who will have children, who will have children, who will have children, who will have children. He'll keep on leaving children behind. I will put someone on the earth who has many generations to come after him. That's the idea behind the word Khalifa. Another suggestion behind the word Khalifa is actually someone left behind to do as he pleases. Like for example, you have a manager that you trust at your company. You say, hey, I'm going on vacation. I am leaving you behind. And when I leave you behind, what does that mean? You're going to have to make the decisions. I'm putting my phone on airplane mode, right? Because you're in charge now. You're the one left behind. He's in a sense the Khalifa. And the idea is, I'm going to leave someone behind on the earth to make decisions. I'm going to give him free will, and I'm going to let him do as he pleases. This is the idea of Khalifa. The other idea of Khalifa is someone left behind that represents, like in a sense, the manager represents who? The boss, right? A manager will only be left behind if the owner has trained him really well, and the owner is confident that even in my absence, he will think, what would the boss have done? I should do what the boss would have done. So he's going to represent the decision-making patterns of his boss. So he's going to reflect the attributes of his boss when he's left to make those decisions. He's not going to change the management style, fire everybody under the company, and change the name, and change the logo, and change the address, and the guy comes back from vacation and he's like, what just happened? Well, you left me in charge. I thought you represented me. I thought I trained you well. The company is going in this trajectory. Even in my absence, it should continue to go in this trajectory. This ties us back to the idea of Khalifa from before, when we were in Allah's company. When we were in Allah's company, I told you we took on droplets of the attributes of Allah, like mercy, like creativity, like the pursuit of wisdom. Allah is wise, we want wisdom. Like the pursuit of knowledge. These attributes were given to us. So when Allah says Khalifa, He's going to leave on the earth someone who is going to take advantage of these droplets of the attributes of Allah that exist inside of his ruh, and he's going to do right on the earth. This is all embedded inside the word Khalifa. And that's why, it's important to note that the rest of the world, the rest of the existence that Allah made, all of it is in submission to Allah. Right? The exception seems to be the human beings and the jinn. What does Allah do over and over in the Qur'an? سبح لله أو يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم or له الملك وله الحمد. يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير. Everything in the skies and the earth declares Allah's perfection. It does exactly what Allah tells them to do. هو الذي خلقكم فمنكم كافر ومنكم مؤمن. But He made you, and some of you believe and some of you disbelieve. Everything else follows the pattern. Everything else is in line. And you people, some of you come and stay in line, some of you get out of line. But you're going to have to make that choice yourself, and that's the decision He declares. In these last 5 minutes, what I want to share with you, inshallah, is something about a principle of the Qur'an. Who is speaking so far? I'm placing a Khalifa on the earth. Who's the one speaking? Allah. Who is He speaking to? إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. What do we know about the malaika? First, we know they're very close to Allah. Second, we know they're constantly doing tasbih of Allah, declaring His perfection. يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ. Third, we know لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They don't disobey Allah in whatever He told them to do, and they do what they're told. They immediately do, they execute what they're told. وَبِأَمْرِهِ يَعْمَلُونَ or يَفْعَلُونَ. They only by His command do they act. What I'm trying to get at is in the view of Islam, in the view of the Quran, what Allah teaches us, angels are incapable of what? Disobedience, disrespect, shirk, kufr, denial. They're incapable of any kind of blasphemy altogether. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. Allah talked to them and said, I've made a decision. The decision is I'm going to put a human being on the earth. Now listen to this. قَالُوا وَتَجْعَلُوا فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءِ. You're going to be placing on it someone who's going to cause corruption? And he's going to spill the endless blood? Rivers of blood? Excuse me? You're going to put someone on the earth? Even though he's going to, this problem and this problem? What does it seem like the angels are doing? We're questioning Allah. They're saying, you're putting someone on the earth? We think it's a pretty bad idea. And here's why. The reason is, he's going to cause a lot of corruption. And he's going to spill a lot of blood. Now, before we deal with that problem, up until now, like since Adam alayhi salam until 2016, it seems like we've proven to the angels that they were wrong. But that's a separate point. Because corruption, us? Come on. Spill blood? No, not us. You know. So do they seem to have, now that we know, do they seem to have a valid criticism? They do. But the bigger point is the fact that they even have a criticism. Who are they to have a criticism against a command or a decision already made by who? By Allah. Now let's take a step back. You're studying Islam. You're studying Deen. You're studying with a scholar. You're studying with a teacher. And you read something you don't understand. You say, Ustad, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how this can be. There's an imam giving a lecture. The guy comes up after the lecture and says, by the way, you said this, this, this. How does that even make any sense? And the imam says to him, Kafir, you question the word of Allah? Who are you? What are your qualifications? Where did you get your degree? I have an ijazah in this, 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 and this. You're going to question me? أخرجوه من المسجد. Kick him out of the masjid. Don't let him come back. This is Iblis. You know. In other words, when you say something about the command of Allah or the decision of Allah or the revelation of Allah and somebody comes along and says, this is not making sense to me. I don't understand how this can work. This seems to be a contradiction. How is this a good idea? Then our immediate response is what? Kafir. How can they? This is blasphemous. You can't ask that question. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Tawbah, 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 tawbah. Like, you know, however you can do it, you know. And sometimes it sounds like it. Some aunties do it so cool, right? They look like they were trained by the airport, you know, when they direct the planes. So, you know, they get the plane to the gate. But anyway, what we're learning in the Quran is angels who never disobey Allah, and are only in obedience to Allah and never question His perfection, asked Him a pretty direct question when they didn't get it. Does that take away from the fact that they're obedient? No. It didn't make them shayateen. By the way, in the same story, later on, somebody else will ask a question. أَأَسْجُدُ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتَ طِينًا. I'm going to do sajda to someone you made from clay? Who asked that question? So angels asked a question. Iblis also asked a question. But Iblis asks a question and becomes Iblis, shaitan. Angels ask a question, and I'd like to argue that the question of Iblis is a lot less offensive to human beings. Iblis's problem was he's made of dirt. That's it. Human beings are made of dirt. That's his problem. Angels, their problem is he's corrupt. He's a killer. Isn't that a lot more offensive than you're made of dirt? And Iblis didn't say something elaborate about himself, like I am so much more qualified. He did say, أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ, but he says, you made me from fire. Angels, actually, if you don't think about this carefully, angels turn to Allah Azza wa Jalla and say, this guy is corrupt, he's a killer, we do tasbih of you. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ. And we're the ones who declare you to be pure. This doesn't sound very humble. This sounds like, why are you giving him the job? Give us the job. And yet Allah is not angry with them. Allah doesn't punish them. And we already know they don't disobey Allah. They're not, they don't contradict Allah. They have no ounce of pride in them. Then how do we understand this text? I feel like teasing you and not telling you any of it until tomorrow. But I'll tell you a little bit of it. I'll give you a hint so you can think overnight. I want you to think Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so you can think. This is not just so I can tell you all the answers. I need you to rack your minds. What is going on here in this story? Allah Azza wa Jal is teaching us that it's not just a question. It's how you ask the question. It's not just about what you ask, it's also about how you ask. It's about how you ask. There's curiosity. Curiosity in and of itself is not forbidden. Not understanding even the command of Allah, not understanding it, not being convinced yet, is not forbidden. But if you come and ask and you question it with pride, arrogance, criticism, you come across as talking down about it, then you've got an Iblis problem. But when you come and ask the same question, you don't understand, but you make sure you say to Allah, Ya Allah, I'm asking this question, but I in no way mean any offense. In no way do I mean that this is imperfect. All I mean is I don't understand. That's all I mean. Then you have every right to ask a question. Our religion is actually a religion of questions. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَتَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance if you people don't know yourselves. I would argue in the Islamic education model and in all education systems, this needs to be a principle. You have the right to ask questions. And when people in positions of authority, professors, scholars, whoever, when they get offended by a question, they are actually departing from the sunnah of Allah. If Allah can give angels the permission to ask a question, who's left? How can you and I say, how dare you ask? You can't. You have to then acknowledge what you can criticize, however, is attitude. Attitude is wrong. If somebody comes with an arrogant attitude, you must put them in their place. And that's the sunnah of Allah too. That's what He did with who? Iblis. But if somebody comes with curiosity, genuine curiosity, they just want to understand, then there's no way you should be getting angry at them. You should be addressing their curiosity. أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. I call to Allah with eyes open, with insight. What a beautiful religion. From the very beginning of the story, we are asked to become inquisitive people. That is the legacy of this deen, subhanAllah. And we haven't even gotten into the story yet. May Allah Azza wa Jal give us a better understanding of this deen and make us people of following this faith with open eyes. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.